in today's video, we're going to continue talking about the next part of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia and how I actually apply some of those principles within CBTI in my sleep coaching practice, helping clients to overcome their long-term insomnia and sleep problems. Now, the reason I record these videos and really talk about cognitive behavioral therapy and the different parts to it is because in my practice I find quite a lot when either people have learned the principles online and experimented with their sleep through that, or it's simply that it's the most recommended treatment plan, but somehow it doesn't seem to create results for the person. Now, one of the biggest parts of cognitive behavioral therapy in my practice is to make sure that I'm working with the client. So whenever I look at these principles, I need to make sure that it is actually going to help the clients. And today's video, we're going to talk about another part of this bigger picture of how this treatment plan uses what we call stimulus control and cognitive control in helping you to really overcome your sleep struggles or insomnia. Like I said, in my practice, I actually often combine different principles, and I might not go through exactly the same way as perhaps CBTI is structured. It is a very structured program that a practitioner might deliver. I tend to actually really work with the client and alter the treatment plan based on their circumstances and based on how complex and often extensive their sleep problems or insomnia is. I don't just do general things. I really make sure that whatever we put in place is going to work for the client with the complexity of their sleep problems. So when it comes to stimulus control and cognitive control as well, I really look at which parts are more relevant to the client itself and how we can integrate these things into their progress. Now, before we talk about these two things in more detail, I wanted to welcome you back if you are a part of my community already. Thank you so much, as always, for your continuous support. If you're brand new, then let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Beatrix Schmidt. I'm a sleep coach, professional speaker, and the creator of the Sleep Skills for Life program, which is very much my way of combining all the different tools, techniques, and exercises that I've learned over the years working with clients and really developing my knowledge of making sure that I can help people overcome their sleep struggles. And hence the name Sleep Skills for Life. We really aim to work with who you are, work with the circumstances that you have so that you can create great quality sleep for many years to come through reliable and effective tools, techniques, and so on. Now, before we again talk about these two things, one more thing to ask you is to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and hit that little bell too, so I can let you know when I post new videos. And the like button is there for you too at the end of this video. If you really enjoy the content, you can let me know that way. Now let's really turn our attention to the first part of today's video, which is all about stimulus control. This is the official name within the structure of cognitive behavioral therapy. But what does that even mean? So let's start looking at the practicalities of it. So stimulus control is simply a way for us to train the body and the mind to understand what the bed is for. Now, the bed is for sleep and intimacy only if you're in a relationship. So what's important is that we don't mix all those daytime activities into bed so that your body and your mind needs to guess what is about to happen. Now, through my practice working with clients, I've seen this a lot where obviously through a lot of different trying tools, techniques, people end up doing an awful lot in bed. They might do meditations, breathing exercises, different tools and techniques, even journaling, maybe just naturally through lifestyle, checking certain things, whether that's social media, emails, so on. Or simply it could just be that you're thinking in bed. You might not be able to completely and easily fall asleep, and therefore the bed becomes this place to do a lot of different things. Now, what we really want to work on is really helping the body and the mind to understand physically, emotionally, and mentally that the bed is for sleep and intimacy only. Now, I know that if you've been struggling for a long time, removing any of those things that you might be using at the moment seems very daunting. But a lot of the times what I see is the more effort you put into sleep, the more tools, techniques, different things you have alongside your evening preparation or even bring to bed with you, the less of the odds become that sleep is what is consistently going to happen within an easy and short period of time. So what do I actually mean by that? Stimulus control is really about decreasing the odds of other things happening. So for example, if let's say one night you might read in bed, another night maybe you use a meditation, another night maybe you watch something, or the fourth night you end up having a conversation with maybe a friend on the phone or maybe your other half. All of those things are odds of what might happen. So if you've got 4, 5, 6 different things that you are partly using, some nights using, or using every night, that decreases the odds for sleep and at least rest. And so this is what we look at when we refer to stimulus control, is how many different things you have in place and what are the odds of sleep happening. So this is the simplest way to describe it. And when you actually really start removing things and really start to train the body and the mind, and this is not just removing things, you got to also add and train the body and the mind to understand what it's supposed to do, when it's supposed to do it. When you start removing all those things that you might have previously used and support your body to understand what the bed is for, what you see is the consistency of falling asleep starts to increase, the sleep efficiency, which I mentioned in previous videos, starts to increase. You're not waking up as many times in the middle of the night and maybe entertaining yourself with different things or even simply just thinking. So that is really the power of really helping the body and the mind to understand what the bed is for. But of course, this isn't just as simple as making a decision and removing all things. So what I found in my practice is a better approach with this idea of stimulus control is to really start helping the person first with the education part, which I also mentioned in a previous video. You can't just remove things and expect the body and the mind to straight away get it. You have to go through that transition of training the body and the mind to understand what the bed is for. Therefore, it becomes easier as you start moving things away from some of these odds. So I hope that makes sense. There is more details into it. So when I really work on this idea of stimulus before bed and this understanding of what the bed is for, it's more complex than just something that can be explained in a very simple way. Every single client often has a different combination of things. Every single client might respond to changes differently. Every single client has a different lifestyle. So a lot of different things come into this part of that training the body and the mind. And I think one of the things that I've seen in my practice is often when people have an idea of what stimulus control is, simply they remove everything, but they don't add or they don't support themselves through that transition. And this is why often I find that people might not be successful in it, because obviously if you just simply remove all the things you're doing, you're left with just sleep. And if you don't know how to really calm yourself down in a physical, emotional, mental way, then of course sleep will not follow. So that's why we have to add together all those different steps so that it becomes a process to get you to a better place. And also when it comes to the name, I don't actually call it stimulus control, because just the word control often actually means that clients tend to be very disappointed or even frustrated when they don't get it straight away. Instead of using the word control, which assumes that you have to put a lot of effort in and you have to really make sure that it's completely aligned and even perhaps somewhat perfectionistic, I actually just simply work on this idea of training the body and the mind to understand what the bed is for. There is no label I put onto it. Now, when we describe it that way, we know whether or not it's happening or not. But if we just use stimulus control as a name and the person doesn't know how to make it happen, then it can actually simply lead to, well, I couldn't control my mind. But that's not what it's necessarily about. It's not just the mind, it's how the body and the mind works together to create the amount of physical, emotional, and mental relaxation so that you can actually really drift into sleep. Now, the next part is when we talk about cognitive control. This is another part of, again, the treatment plan. So it's important not to just pick up on one thing and not actually support it through other parts of this treatment plan as well, or other tools or principles. So when it comes to cognitive control, often one of the recommended things within the treatment plan is to spend time earlier in the daytime. So often it's recommended you do it early evening. Let's say if you go to bed at 11 o'clock, something like 7 o'clock, you would sit down and spend half an hour or an hour to really write down all the things that maybe either happened during the day, things that might bother you, things that maybe you have got going on the next day, and really just spend that time with pen and paper to write those things out. Now, of course, in its principle, it's a great thing because it really allows the person to spend time dealing with whatever is going on for them. But unfortunately, what I see in my practice is it becomes something else. It doesn't become an exercise where you really actually close things down or let them go or really make peace with them. It often becomes either what people refer to as worry time, which means they just continuing to think about what they worried about, or it becomes writing a to-do list. So what actions do you need to do maybe tomorrow, or what actions you might need to wrap up even later on that evening. Or a third part where it becomes quite forced in terms of making yourself feel positive. So you might talk about a situation that happened earlier in the day, but then you almost force yourself to extract the positive parts to it and leave behind or push away the negative parts. I have seen a lot of different combination of these sort of different ideas when it comes to this particular exercise. And a lot of the times what's happening with that one is that it just keeps the person in that same place, and often that same place is what causes them problems to begin with. Now again, I'm guessing here, so I'm not sure what your situation is, and I am talking a bit more generally about this, but what's really important with this idea of cognitive control, and again, I don't refer to it as cognitive control, I really just look at what shows up for the client and how do we deal with whether or not something is a stressor, so that it triggers them, or it raises emotions, or it entertains their mind, or so on. And if the exercise for you is not creating a positive influence, meaning you're able to completely close your day and let it go, then most of the time what that means is that this idea of cognitive control is more about controlling something than actually really completely making peace with it. Now, bear with me on that one. Now, obviously, the exercise is supposed to help you to let go of things, but most of us don't really learn what letting go really is. Often we learn to distract ourselves, or we learn to turn them into actions. Truly letting go of something and closing something down also means that you're emotionally letting it go, and you're actually letting it go from your head as well. Now, a lot of the times what I've seen with clients when they put in place a version of this sort of writing exercise is that actually it creates a very different outcome. They might write things down, but let's say maybe when they can't fall asleep, that thing comes back in and they continue to think about it. Or maybe they've written down something earlier in the day, but in the middle of the night when they wake up, it actually comes back into their mind and they start to either problem solve it or whatever else they might up doing with it. So what's important to understand with this one is that it needs to be effective. Now, there is no one way of doing a type of exercise like this, like a writing, or often people refer to it as a journaling exercise. There's many different versions and there's many different principles behind it. So when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy and this idea of cognitive control, what's important is that it works, whatever the exercise or tool that you're using is actually working for you in order to be able to separate the daytime from the nighttime and truly let go of things in a way where you are dealing with them emotionally, mentally, and obviously physically as well, depending on the situation. If you just spend half an hour or 60 minutes writing down a bunch of things, but they don't help you to feel completely relaxed and actually allow them to let you go, then that's not really going to create that outcome. So I hope that again this helped you to understand what it might be for you and how you can maybe change the practice you have. When I use this part in my practice, I actually really first look at what shows up. You've got to understand what shows up. So if somebody says I've got a racing mind, that is just one layer. We need to understand what is their racing mind about? What are the themes that pop up? And often these themes change, but we then have to look at how do they change, what might trigger them, and so on. So you can't just control it. You have to first understand it and become self-aware of what is showing up and how it's affecting you first. So I hope that these two parts of this cognitive behavioral therapy route is a bit more practical for you. Like I said earlier, this is a bit more complex than you can just explain it in a short video. Often, as a client, I see how different it plays out in people's lives. I see how it plays out in my life and how it used to play out in my life when I used to struggle with insomnia. You know, stimulus control and cognitive control is part of our human being, so it never really goes away. So this is where I often refer back to the fact that back then when I struggled with insomnia, I was a very analytical type person. I'm still an analytical type person, but what's not there anymore is that this cognitive part of who I am is no longer stopping me to be able to sleep well. Again, the stimulus part of my life is no longer stopping me to be able to completely separate from the daytime to the nighttime and treat the bed for intimacy and sleep only. So this is how, with the person, you've got to work on how they show up in their life and really tailor some of those practices or tools or exercises or versions of exercises that we put in place. So thank you so much for watching. I'm sure that this video is one of those videos that perhaps raises more questions than gives you answers. But of course, I wanted to just start talking about it in a more proactively practical way, because if you're not able to know how to put it in place for yourself, then it's going to be not as useful. So if you've got any questions on this idea of stimulus control or cognitive control in your situation, then you're very welcome to pop a comment below and ask away. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe to my channel, hit that little bell so I can let you know when I post new videos, and if you like the content of the video, then hit that like button below as well. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in the next video.